Before you could speak, you were already learning the rules. Not rules anyone taught you, rules your nervous system wrote on its own, from watching what happened when you cried, when you reached out, when you needed something and either got it or didn't. Those early lessons didn't stay in childhood. They followed you into every friendship, every argument, every moment you've pulled someone close or quietly pushed them away. Most people assume the relationships that hurt them as adults stem from adult choices. The wrong partner, the wrong friend, the wrong timing, but what the research keeps returning to is something older than any of that. The pattern was already forming before you had language for it. John Bowlby spent decades studying what happens when that earliest bond is threatened or broken. In Attachment and Loss, published in 1969, he described attachment not as sentiment, but as a biological survival system. The infant doesn't attach to a caregiver because it is sweet to do so. It attaches because proximity to a protective figure is, quite literally, a matter of survival. The nervous system wires itself around that reality. What this means for you, sitting here now, is that somewhere underneath your adult reasoning, there is still a system that learned how relationships work from the very first one you ever had. That system still runs. It shapes who you trust, how quickly you trust them, what you do when conflict appears, and how much space you can tolerate before you start to feel unsafe. This is not a story about blame. Your parents were doing what their own early bonds taught them. But understanding where the blueprint came from is the first step toward deciding which parts of it still serve you, and which parts have quietly been working against you all along. In the late 1960s and early 1970s, developmental psychologist Mary Ainsworth designed a deceptively simple experiment. She called it the strange situation. A mother and her infant would be brought into an unfamiliar room. Then, briefly, the mother would leave. Researchers watched what the infant did while she was gone, and crucially, how the infant responded when she returned. What Ainsworth and her colleagues found, published in Patterns of Attachment in 1978, revealed that children do not all attach in the same way. Securely attached children were distressed when their mother left, but settled quickly when she returned. Their nervous system had learned something reliable. The world is sometimes frightening, but care comes back. A second group, now described as anxiously attached, clung even after the mother returned. They could not be soothed. Their system had recorded a different lesson. Care arrives, but it might vanish at any moment, so never fully relax your guard. A third group showed something that looked, on the surface, like calm independence. They barely reacted when the mother left. They barely acknowledged her return. Ainsworth called this avoidant attachment. Their system had learned that expressing need doesn't reliably bring closeness, so it suppresses the signal entirely. What looks like self-sufficiency is often a trained silence. A fourth pattern, identified later by Mary Main and Judith Solomon, is called disorganized attachment. It emerges when the caregiver is also the source of fear. The child faces an irresolvable contradiction. The person I need is the person I am afraid of. No coherent strategy is possible. None of these are character flaws. Every single one of them was an adaptation. Each made sense in the specific environment where it formed. The part that took researchers longer to confirm is how persistent these patterns are. The assumption was that childhood attachment styles belong to childhood and that adult relationships operate on entirely different logic. That assumption didn't hold. Cindy Hazan and Philip Shaver published a study in 1987 that applied Ainsworth's framework directly to adult romantic relationships. The proportions they found were striking. Roughly 60% of adults described experiences consistent with secure attachment. About 25% showed patterns consistent with avoidant attachment. Around 19 to 20% showed anxious patterns. The categories didn't vanish when people grew up. They migrated. What surprises me most about this finding is how quietly the migration happens. The avoidantly attached adult doesn't announce, "I am suppressing my need for closeness because intimacy once felt unreliable." They simply feel a vague irritation when a partner needs too much. They call it independence. The anxiously attached adult doesn't think, I am hypervigilant because early care was inconsistent. They think, I just need a little reassurance, and then a little more. Daniel Kahneman, in Thinking Fast and Slow, published in 2011, described the mind as running two systems, one fast and automatic, the other slow and deliberate. Your attachment patterns live in the fast system. They fire before you have consciously decided anything. By the time you are aware of feeling distant or hurt or clingy, the system has already shaped your behavior. This is why insight alone rarely changes the pattern. You can know intellectually that you pull away when someone gets close, and still pull away. But here is the part that took me longest to accept, and the part I think matters most. These patterns are not destiny. Bowlby himself was careful to describe attachment styles as working models, not fixed traits. A model can be revised when it encounters enough contradictory evidence. The question is what counts as evidence for the nervous system. Research on what attachment theorists call earned security suggests that adults who grew up with insecure attachment can develop secure relational patterns through consistent experience with a reliable other. That other can be a partner, a therapist, a close friend. The key word is consistent. One repair is not enough. The nervous system is a pattern matcher. It needs repetition before it will update its expectations. Viktor Frankl, in Man's Search for Meaning, first published in German in 1946 and in English in 1959, described the human capacity to locate a response, even in the most constrained conditions. You cannot choose your early history, but you can begin to notice when the old template is running in a new situation where it no longer applies. That noticing is the beginning of change, small at first, wider with practice. The most practical thing you can take from attachment research is this. The next time you feel yourself shutting down in a relationship or escalating in one, pause long enough to ask whether the threat is real or remembered. Your nervous system cannot always tell the difference, but you can learn to. And that distinction between a threat that is present and a threat that is simply familiar may be the most important thing you ever teach yourself. If questions like this one interest you, about how the patterns underneath our thinking shape the lives we build, there is more here exploring exactly that. Subscribe if you want to keep building a clearer map of your own inner life.